Yoy, yoy, yoy. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino. It is a cold, wet October day here in Niagara Falls, Ontario, but it's a perfect day to get out in the shop, turn the heat on, and address an issue that I found with my new fat bar setup on my DR650. And that is, I really need to safety wire the grips onto these new bars. So why don't you sit back, grab yourself something warm to drink, and enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. We'll get to work on this in just a minute. For many of you out there, especially those that either ride dual sports or especially motocross and trails bikes, you are probably familiar with safety wiring your hand grips onto your bike. For me, I haven't really safety wired grips for a long time. In fact, prior to my DR650, the last time I really had to safety wire grips was probably back in the mid to late 80s. I had a 1983 RM80 that I rode for a number of years, and I had to safety wire the grips on that bike. But more than likely, the last time that I really had to safety wire was probably for a bicycle motocross, a BMX bike. I raced BMX for a while, and we safety wired the grips onto the handlebars there. So it was probably like a 1986 or 87 Norco Starfire was probably the last race bike that I had, and then I got more into freestyle. But then my motorcycling turned more to street bikes, and I've said this before, mostly two-stroke street bikes of the Yamaha generation, so think RDs and RZs. After that, I really didn't need to safety wire the grips. I would put them on the same way I'd always put them on, using hairspray, and they would grip to the bars just fine for everything that I needed on the street. When I bought this DR650 several years ago, I did change the grips out to these Uri style grips, which I've said before I really like, and I used hairspray like I always had, and it worked fine. I got a couple seasons out of it before I put these new fat bars on. Now, the new fat bars really gave me a bit of a problem, especially on the clutch side here. I ran out of hairspray, I had to buy a new container, and I noticed that this side here just will not stick using hairspray. Now, I racked this up to the new can of hairspray that I had, figuring the formulation had changed over the years. But when I put brand new grips on, when I put on my Bark Busters, well, the throttle tube works fine without safety wiring. It's nice and tight, and it just appears to be the clutch side that won't stick. My thinking is the clutch side bar is knurled, and perhaps, unlike the stock bar, there's just not enough surface area there for the hairspray to really tack up and grab that bar and be solid. So I'm going to end up safety wiring both the throttle tube and the clutch side here just to tighten them up a little bit more. Again, I haven't done this in a number of years. In fact, I went to YouTube myself just to refresh my memory, and I'm pretty sure I remembered how to do it, and sure enough, I'm going to show you the way that I was showing a lot of years ago. It doesn't appear like it's changed much, but let's get to work. We'll do the clutch side and I'll show you how it's done. So let's take a look at what you're going to need to do this job first. The first thing you're going to need when you're working on safety wiring is, of course, safety wire. This is stainless steel safety wire, and it's, I don't know if it's annealed, but it's soft enough to take the twisting and strong enough, if you do it right, not to break. This, I believe, is 24 thou. I think that's roughly 0.6 or 0.7 millimeters here. I'll try to get a measurement for you. And you don't need a lot of this if you're not safety wiring a lot of motorcycles. This pack here has lasted me a couple sets of grips. There's lots in there, and you could use this to safety wire your neutral safety switch as well if you so choose. The next thing you need is obviously something to cut it with, so some kind of pair of side cutters, pliers, anything will do. Even these journeyman pliers here, something that it'll cut with. Now you can use just regular journeyman pliers to twist this stuff up. It will work. It's a little bit harder to do. The next step up from this might be a set of vice grip type pliers where you can open up, you can put your safety wire strands in there, and then you can twist that to get it to work. But really, the best way to do it, and a tool that's not terribly expensive, is this tool, which is a set of safety wiring pliers. Let me put these over here. These have a nice fine tip so you can get into tight spots with them. They'll grip your wires very well, and then you can lock them in place using this slide here, acting similar to a set of locking pliers. So they hold the wire for you. And then what really sets these apart is they have a spring-loaded spiral helix inside the pliers that you can pull on, and it'll twist the wires for you. These are often called aviation pliers because in the aviation industry, many of the fasteners are safety wired. So a tool like this saves them tremendous amounts of time, but more importantly, it produces a very uniform twist in the wire that's reliable, it looks good, and it's professional. It's not expensive. You can buy these online for around $25 depending on the quality of which you buy. I inherited these from my brother-in-law Andrew, and I use them and I think about them every time I use these pliers. The other tool you're going to need is a nice set of needle nose pliers. We're going to use this after we've twisted the wire up and we've trimmed it to length. We're going to use the needle nose pliers to form a crook on the end of the wire. So a good set of those, and again a nice set of side cutters like this does help, but most pliers do have some kind of wire cutter built in, so these are not necessary, but they're just a nice thing to have. Here I can show you how the grip is kind of loose on the outside, but up here the hairspray really did its job. It's tacked on there really well. This is where there is a smooth section of bar, and the knurling starts probably around in here and carries on all the way to the end of the bar. And I think this is why it's loose. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start my safety wiring here and then work down through these different grooves, pushing out any trapped air out to the outside. There's still some hairspray underneath here that I've sprayed on, and it's lubricated it a little bit. So as it dries, between that and the safety wiring, it should hold this grip really, really well. Most grips that you buy for a dual sport, or especially motocross, will have some type of provision for safety wiring within the design of the grips. These Uris, it's extremely exaggerated. But the idea is we're going to put, 4 loops here, 1, 2, 3, 4 loops of wire, tighten those up, and they're going to clamp this grip right to the bar. But there is a technique to this, to getting it done right, and that is the double wrap method, and I want to show you that right now. For this example, we're going to assume this pipe here is our, clutch side lever, I suppose. It might be a little bit easier to see. Some people will do what's called a one wrap twist or one wrap safety wiring. That's where you take your safety wire here, you wrap it around once, and we're going to clamp this with our pliers like so, and they spin that up like this. And that's how they safety wire. Now there's obviously some finishing here that we're going to do, but essentially that's a 1-wrap safety wire. The problem with this is it has a tendency to sometimes snap, and it doesn't have as much purchasing points around on the bar itself. I'm just going to cut this one off, and I'm going to show you how I was shown. And I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way, but this is how I was shown how to do it. We start with a little bit longer piece of wire. And the way I was shown was, if this is my clutch lever here, I want to make sure the twist ends up at the palm of my hand over here. So my fingers, as my fingers work on it, doesn't pull them out. That's just the way I was taught. So to do this, we start by putting the wires facing forward on the bar. Then we cross them and we wrap them back, forming a double loop. Now before we twist these, I like to make sure that my wraps don't overlap, and I give them a gentle tug to set them, and then we start the wrapping process the same as we did before. Of course, when we get close to the end, we are going to release this, because if we continue to twist, there's a chance this is going to snap. We re-grab it, and we do the final few twists by hand here until everything's nice and tight. Then of course you're going to come in, cut these off, and then I'll show you what to do with this 1 inch or less of tail that's left on here once we get on the bike. And I think I'll use this groove to bury my tails, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So I'm just going to start by, again, facing forward, looping my wire, trying to get it into the groove there, and then I'll bring those back like this. And I have a little bit more wire on here than you really need. I just want to make sure you can see how it's being done. And clamp that. Hopefully I have both strands. Looks like I do. Now I've got to try to line up this line here. So I'm going to pull this snug, not too tight, aiming the tip of my pliers for that groove right there. And now I'm going to start the twist. And again, you're going to see I've got way more wire here than I need. I'm going to bring it down close, but not all the way, and then I'll release these pliers. I'm going to come in and finish the last few twists by hand until it's nice and snug. I'm going to try to do this backwards, so it might not be the most graceful. What we want to do with this remaining twisted tail is lay it down inside this channel and almost force it underneath the grip so you don't end up with these sharp barbs that could cut your hands. The process starts with your needle nose pliers, taking about 1/4 of an inch, about 5 millimeters, and bending it towards the grip like this. It needs to almost be 90 degrees, but I find I leave it a little bit less than 90 degrees. Then what you're going to do, maybe I'll bend it just a little more than that. It's basically forms a needle here that you're going to force down into the grip rubber itself. I like to use needle nose pliers because you can really get a good grip on them here. And you can work this tip down underneath the rubber itself. And what most guys will do afterwards, or most riders will do, is they'll use like a ball peen hammer and gently tap it, and that flattens out the barb and forces it under the grip, and it really does tighten things up. A little bit of caution though when you're doing this on your throttle side is most throttle tubes are plastic. So you need to be very cautious with that hammer when you're tapping it down flat. You're not trying to drive a nail, you're just trying to flatten that out and set it underneath the rubber. And you can see now it's completely out of the way. So I'm going to work my way down these grips and we'll see how well it tightens everything up. That is that. I was able to basically safety wire these in about 10 minutes per grip if I wasn't filming. And I think overall they turned out pretty good. I am not an expert at this. Like I said earlier, the last time I really safety wired grips was probably back in the 80s. So some of my wraps aren't perfect. The twists could have been tucked in a little nicer. However, they are still functional, and they really did tighten the grip up a lot. Now, I did put a little bit extra hairspray underneath this before I snugged them up. So the centers here are still a little bit sloppy, but I'm confident those are going to tighten up as the hairspray does dry and pack in there. I just wanted you to know that just because you've never done something like this doesn't mean you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. Motocross riders and rally riders all safety wire their grips to give them a much firmer feel to the grip. It doesn't slip when it gets wet. It gives them confidence that their grip of choice is going to stay in place. So you can do this as much as I can do it. It's not hard. It just takes a couple tools, the right wire, and a little bit of patience. If you like this video, please comment on things I've done right or things I may have done better so other people can learn from your knowledge as well. If you really do like the content, please consider subscribing. It does help get my videos out to more people, and I love watching the channel grow. Until then, I'm going to put everything away here and get up to the studio so I can produce this video for you to watch. But until then, you have yourself a great day. I hope you stop by here again at Dino's Tinker Shed. But until then, you tinker easy. Bye for now.